PSA meeting, and I can see that persons just don't want to miss a beat. Somebody was asking if we're on a break. And they were so relieved to know that we haven't started it. But I just want to welcome you all and thank you for taking time out to join us. And I can assure you that today's meeting will be very beneficial to us all. And at this time, I just want to hand over to our moderator, who is Miss Marisha Morgan. She's our past student representative. So over to you, Marisha.
Okay, I was seeing a bit of lag on my screen, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Denise just said, I am going to be moderating your part 2 of what can I do with my degree. Sorry about that. I look forward to this session, especially with the panelists that we have. I've been exposed to a good number of them, and I do believe that we'll be getting some solid information, and I will be jumping into this right now. Just let me get situated just a bit. Okay, so I will be moderating your session. Session 1, well, sessions actually. Session 1 will be featuring Dr. Rosemary Johnson and Dr. Debbie Ann Chambers. They are clinical and counseling psychologists, respectively, rather, and we will be jumping in with this opening session. So, psychology is vast and it is ever evolving. You know, every day we come and we hear different research coming up, and that spurs another field, right? And from the widely known subgroups like clinical and counseling psychology to forensic, and down to the niche fields like geriatric, there is always something for a different branch. The human experience and curiosity, it's always really exploding the different types of industries that come out of this field. And so it isn't wrong for anyone to be asking, well, what can I do with my degree now? Even if you thought that you came in with some solid plan of action, right? I want to be a psychologist, I want to specialize in this. Now that you've come to university, you're being exposed to so many different avenues. And then even further, that curiosity then bleeds over into, well, what would my day-to-day even be like after I do settle down on a specific specialty, right? So we're here to discuss that. And as I said, we'll be having Dr. Rosemary Johnson, right? So she is a lady of many hats and obligations. And among them is being a licensed clinical psychologist, as I said, operating a private practice in Jamaica and Miami. She spent 30 years of her life dedicated to helping individuals lead empowered lives through her work as a quit smoking specialist, a life coach, and she's also touched their lives in the education arena by being a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies. We also have Dr. Debbie Ann Chambers. She's the head of the unit of the University Counseling Service. She's also dedicated her expertise and talents to the world of counseling, community development, research, and teaching. So I do ask that we all make them welcome and listen attentively. So, Dr. Johnson, are you here?
I am.
Hi, Dr. Johnson. Okay. So we begin with you. What are the day-to-day roles of a clinical psychologist?
I think it varies, and so we can be considered to be generalist in one sense. So what does that mean? We're generalist in that we deal with the spectrum of human functioning. So we deal with people who want to take their lives to the next level, and we deal with people who are having serious challenges. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say the spectrum. We work in a variety of situations. So for me personally, I do many different things. because I have gone and got lots of extra training beyond my degree in psychology. And so I have a private practice that I operate on a Friday and Saturday. It's now virtual, thanks in a real way to COVID, because I prefer my virtual therapy. I see a range of challenges, but of late, my practice seems to be about people who want to take their lives to another level. I do executive coaching. I work with couples. I work with families. I sometimes consult in the forensic area. So it's just, the training allows me to do several different things. So in addition to the clinical stuff, I am also a researcher. And so the training is broad and allows you to support any aspect that involves human beings. So if that helps.
Okay, so I recognize that you made a point of bringing up the private practice and that you most likely dedicate 2 days to engaging with it.
Mm-hmm.
What goes into actually planning for that private practice? What goes into the running for it to go smoothly?
Okay, I think that my practice is different from most. So I am a one-woman show. So what does that mean? I do everything for myself. And the virtual space has made that a whole lot easier. So I make my appointments, they're virtual. I don't have overhead. So what do I mean? So I don't have any employees. I don't have to pay extra rent. So it really is, I decided that it would be nice to keep my skills honed if I added to my academic role at UWI. And that's how my private practice started. I just wanted to continue to have my pulse on psychotherapy and psychological assessments. And I have been in practice since 1996. And since COVID, I've never had a waiting list, but now I do. And of course, because the demand since COVID has just ballooned. And there are not a lot of psychologists in Jamaica to offer services, if you can believe that.
I was just about to ask a while ago, because you said that the demand had bloomed. I was looking at, so I was watching Law and Order the other day. Mm-hmm. And that's spanning obviously from the 90s coming up right now. It's a very long running TV show. And I can sense that there has been this sort of hostility, persons ascribed to psychologists on a whole, shrinking heads, trying to get you to say something, incriminate yourself and whatever. So when you said that persons it's in demand now, your practice, your services. I was about to ask you, what do you believe is the Jamaican demand for psychology? Because there's still the prevalent belief that psychologists are still out to get you, and you can't possibly be seen going into an office because persons think that you're mad. Okay. So what has the demand? Well, you already answered that. So that's those I was going to segue into.
So the issue of stigma, I have never, and I think that people continue to be a little bit reluctant to speak openly that I have a psychologist. But I mean, since the 90s, when people are hurting, they are hurting. And so they reach out for help. And so I've never gotten the sense since I've been here that people are avoiding psychological support. One of the things I can say to you, though, and I think that this is a bigger, wider societal issue, is that for any health-related issue, people wait until they have no other option. And I believe that in the context of psychology, we literally are the last row. So the church even comes in before us. You go to your friend, you go to a preacher, you go to church, you go to, for those who believe in OB and all of that is exhausted. And we literally are the last resort. And so by that time, you can imagine that people are not thinking about who is going to see me. It really is, I need some relief from this emotional, psychological pain, and I need it now.
Understood. From what I'm getting from that sentiment, and I want to segue now to Dr. Chambers, I'd assume that in the day-to-day interactions with various personalities, persons with different levels of traumas or issues coming to you, there would be some problematic patients, some problematic clients. Is there a specific way that you deal with them, or do you try to employ traditional practices in the same manner, Dr. Chambers?
Okay, so hi everybody. Let me try to take that question. So I actually have very similar experiences. I just have to say that first with Dr. Johnson. In that there was actually a time when I didn't want to be in private practice. I do like community work very much and community agency work. And so I thought I probably won't. And I'm now in private practice. And the pandemic has kind of, because I kept getting calls, Dr. Chambers, please, I think you would be. And I said, okay, all right, you know what? Since it's virtual, I don't have to rent an office space. Let me just see. And I'm telling you, I've had to cap it. And every time I cap it and go, I cannot, I will get calls. Well, can't you? So I don't have a waiting list now just because I've had to cap it, but I could easily see how one could grow. And I have colleagues doing a similar thing. So I think we're reaching a point in Jamaica that I've never seen before, where psychologists now are booked out. So I had somebody at Tea House Therapy, which is a new place, call me and say, hey, can you take some of our people because we have wait lists? And I said, well, I'm not taking anybody, but I know this person over here. So it's a point, I think, at which people recognize that there is a need and a confidential space where they can talk about things, and they're gravitating towards it. So I just kind of wanted to say that first. So both here at the counseling center and in my private practice these days, yes, similar to Dr. Johnson, I see a wide variety of what we call presenting concerns, anything from the typical at UA adjustment with, let's say, a depressed mood or an anxious mood as students adjust to university life, especially now in the new normal, to working with people who may have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, right? Even in counseling, so I work closely with the psychiatrist and provide various levels of care and support. In terms of problematic, it depends. So I try, I'm human, but I try not to label things so much as problematic as to be curious about what is bringing about this behavior, this feeling, this way of coping. Usually it comes from a wound in somebody's life. I see people with also trauma. So often it's a way that people defend against trauma. So even some of the interactions in our day-to-day that can either frustrate us or overwhelm us with others in our lives, often, especially in our context of Jamaica, they're responding to some early trauma. We know that we have persons with a lot of what we call adverse childhood experiences, which includes anything from emotional neglect to verbal and sexual abuse. We know we have high rates of that in Jamaica. So that being said, how do I serve people? It varies, and I smile with that because there's so many theories and interventions coming out. I've come to a point where I realize I have to just focus on one. So even after you finish your PhD, you're still studying like nothing, and so this is it. I'm using more and more quite a bit of mindfulness-based practices, so helping people to breathe deeply and to develop body awareness. Because when we experience trauma, we become very uncomfortable in our own bodies. Especially here at UWI, some of the mindfulness-based practices definitely helps with anxiety. This is around the time of the semester where we're starting to see spike in anxiety as we're moving towards the end of semester. I am at the heart of it, I think, a relational therapist. So I think that people grow in and through relationships, and you can use the relationship in therapy to learn a lot about people and to help people navigate relationships. So my foundation is relational work, and sometimes I include techniques from other modalities. So these days I'm including a lot of what we call IFS, internal family systems techniques, which people that I work with, surprisingly to me, seem to gravitate towards and like. That being said, I'm a big group person. I absolutely love groups. And I'm always laughing at the health center and said, if they would just allow me to do groups all day, I would do groups because I absolutely love groups. I tend to use off of poetry therapy in groups. I remember I was asked to talk about that a little bit. So I am a certified poetry therapy practitioner, and I'm going for a different level of certification in poetry therapy. And there are many ways to facilitate poetry therapy, but which I can talk about later if anybody's interested in hearing more about that. But basically, either using poems, a poem that already exists to help somebody work through anxiety, depression, or trauma. Poems have a way of validating experience. And so you will see your emotions, thoughts, experiences in a poem, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. And especially when it's a group and everybody chooses a line, like that line speaks to me, and you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one that line would speak to. It's very healing, right? And there are other techniques which include not presenting a poem, but as the psychologist, writing a poem as somebody speaks about their experience and presenting it to them. The fancy word, we have a lot of fancy words in psychology. You might call it embodied cognition, so that somebody's experience kind of comes outside of them, especially in trauma, and it is contained in a safe space on a paper, and then it becomes something meaningful. So you make something meaningful out of the traumatic experience. So those are some of the things that I do. I'm laughing at myself because I'm one of those persons who have a million thoughts. So I'm moving into the space of life now, where I realize I need to settle down and do one or two or three things. I don't know, that's just if that will ever happen, but we can talk about it a bit more.
You emphasize that you liked working with groups, and I want to ask if putting persons with like issues in groups, if you find that persons are more willing to open up, or do you find that there are individuals who will clam up because as much as they may suss out that everyone here has similar issues, they don't want to be the worst one in the pack?
Sure.
Have you seen that?
Well, it varies. You don't have to put people with like issues in a group. You can do that. You can have a depression group or an anxiety group, but you can have more a process group using poetry, and people have different presenting concerns. So just like in every day where you might have the very talkative person and the very shy person, the person who's filled with shame, you're going to find that in a group. My experience at UWI, doing groups, so there was a time, I would say maybe 7 to 8 years ago, where we thought nobody would come in a group because this is Jamaica and people don't want to talk them business. But the pandemic, people have shown up to the poetry groups and they find a lot of consolation again, even if they have different concerns, consolation in knowing I'm not that lonely, because there are people who struggle, are in the struggle. It's not just me. It's not that something is wrong with me. I also have experienced where often this is a therapeutic part of a group, where somebody in a group, let's say, gives advice or feedback or a tender word to somebody else, and that person benefits because they realize they have something to offer other people. They're not as broken as they think they are. They're something resilient and valuable. And it's, to tell you the truth, in group therapy, it is better when support comes from the other people in the group than me. Because it gets to a point where like, Dr. Chambers, we don't even need you to be here. Thank you. You can witness. We'll deal with each other. And then I just kind of hang out. So, yeah. So.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm getting from that is that on the outside, at least the fear of persons knowing your business is way higher than the actual whatever negatives it could actually bring out, because actually everyone's in this space to be supportive, to be a collective. Okay, thank you for that perspective. And now I want to throw this question out to both Dr. Johnson and Dr. Chambers, starting with Dr. Chambers, since you're already in the middle of my screen. What strategies do you employ to ensure that you don't bring work home with you?
Oh, that was the wrong person. I keep it very real. Okay, I use a lot of humor. So I'm going to be very real with you as psychology students, okay? There is a point in my profession where I may have given you an answer like I have to take care of myself. And that's true, and I will tell you about that. But sometimes I think about people. Sometimes once in a while, I will dream about somebody and I'll go, okay, I wonder what's going on there. It's not that I'm carrying people on my head, but I do have relationships with, people tell me things they don't tell anybody else. That being said, yes, you do have to take care of yourself. And I think for many of us in this profession, you go into it because you identify yourself as a helpful person. Maybe that's been a part of your role or identity for a very long time. And so in the years in the profession, you have to come to understand that you cannot be of help if you are burnt out. And even more so, you may do harm to people. So I'm human, and I laugh and I tell students that sometimes if you catch me on a wrong day and you come into the health center, and maybe you ask a question where I'm like, I just answered that question. Maybe you don't know me, you just said, I just answered that question 4 times. And if you go out a road and you said, boy, that Dr. Chambers, she kind of miserable. And maybe one of my clients would say, she's the sweetest. No, you just caught me on a wrong day. I was tired. And then I will go to the ladies and say, you need to mark out a day in my book because I'm getting miserable. And I'm going to bring that out on people, and people, as Dr. Johnson, are coming here hurting. So it's a shift that you will have to make as a psychologist to go, if I am burnt out, I may actually do more harm than good. Therefore, even if somebody is not happy that Dr. Shane was not in office for a week, they will be happier in the long run because I'm in a better place to serve them.
Right. An empty cup can't pour into another. Dr. Johnson, your take?
So remind me of the specific question again, because several things went through my mind as I was listening to Dr. Chambers.
Sure. What strategies would you employ to ensure that you don't bring work home with you?
Oh, now this is interesting because I just told you I have a home practice. The practice is in the house, but I think that I have used other ways to kind of put boundaries around certain things. So for me, and their colleagues that work with me in the unit, I don't know how they do this, but for me, I can't mix academia and the practice. That for me is too much. And so I teach from Monday to Thursday, and my private practice is Friday and Saturday only. So that boundary allows me to manage the potential ups and downs. I don't answer my phone at certain times, okay? I don't, and so that's also a boundary. I also, and this is a practice I maybe started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I recognize that I need to take care of me first. So I have 2 hours every single morning where I just pour into me, so that, and this is before I engage with anybody. And so every single day I am resetting at, this is a gorgeous day, I'm so happy to be alive, kind of thing. And what do the 2 hours involve? So it's about me taking care of physical. So I wake up and I drink 16 ounces of lemon water. And having done that, then I meditate. And this is about for 20 minutes. And then after that, I connect spiritually, and then I do my prayer journal. And my prayer journal is about giving thanks for everything and anything that I want to happen. And what that does for me is that it gives me results in advance. So when my mind hears, thank you for engaged students who participate 100%, my mind thinks I already have it. And so it's a different me that shows up, for students. And so after I've exercised, and then after the spiritual connection, then I exercise for 45 minutes. And after I do that, then I go look at my orchids. And then I am ready to start getting dressed. And this is something that this is a practice that I have daily. And so when I need to support people who are going through all sorts of emotional stuff, I am already full. So I navigate that easily. I also, and I don't know if this is my personality or something that I was trained into, I am able to disengage from my patients very, very easily. And I don't, again, because the boundaries are so in my head, I don't think about them again until I need to see them again. And so how does my practice work? So it's 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. I force myself to take a break from 12 to 1, and then I do another 3 hours. And I find that if I see more than 6 people for the day, it's too much. And so it's about taking the feedback from self and making the adjustments accordingly.
One of your points, I really love that, because now it segues into my next question for you. It's when you're talking about giving thanks and your mind recognizing that what you've given thanks for is like your receipt, you already have it.
Mm-hmm.
What is NeuroLinguistic Programming, and how do you conduct it?
Okay, so neuro relates to our neurology, how we receive information. Linguistics is about the languaging, which is actually the exact words that we use. And the programming relates to the strategies that we use mentally in order to give meaning to our experiences. So neurolinguistic programming, it is a strategy that helps us to break down in a very conscious way how people think And once you understand how they think, you can then use language to get them to change mindset, to change strategies. There are maybe 200 and something neurolinguistic programming strategies. And basically, what it's about is using words to change people's perception of things. And let me give you a for example. I used to have a weakness for Snickers. And every time I'm cashing out, I needed to get a Snicker. Neurolinguistic programming has this strategy called mapping over. And it is about adjusting how I represented the Snicker in my mind. And how do we represent? We represent based on our senses. So it's seeing, it's hearing, it's tasting. And literally what I did was I mapped over okra, which is something I can't stand, mapped it over to what was represented as Snickers. And it was instant. I no longer crave Snickers. I no longer have a desire for it. And so this is a kind of, for example, there's this fast phobia model as well. I use it to help people to get rid of lizard phobias in like 10, 15 minutes. But again, it's about understanding how we program things at the level of our neurology and just adjusting that. And the adjustment then, it's an instant thing. It makes the meaning that we give to the stuff disappear. And so we can then have different types of behaviors.
Oh, okay. That's okay. So it feels like what you've just described in layman's terms, there's this thing going around now, manifestation. And barring the mapping, because I suppose persons will also say, well, maybe I don't like this aspect of a dream, but because I have to go through it, I will, and therefore liken it to something else that I do like. That sounds like what we're seeing in the internet age everywhere. So I suppose we've been exposed to it and we haven't really even noticed. I remember some time ago when you came to PSA and you were speaking to us about neurolinguistic programming, you brought up something about negative words actually not being negative when.
Oh, okay. I think what I had said is that the mind doesn't process the negative. And so if you say, I don't want to fail, what the biocomputer called mind is.
Dr. Johnson? Oh no. Did she drop off? Did her connection fall off?
It seems so. Maybe she got a little frozen for a while.
Yeah, she's still frozen, but.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Okay, so I'll continue with you, Dr. Chambers. I wanted to go back to the very beginning for you, right? You had to start somewhere. What would have been your greatest help when studying for your current field?
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that because I did want to tell the story of how I started, because I think it might resonate with several students. So if you find, Dr. Johnson, I hope she gets back on. So if you find, because I want to hear what she was saying too. I've heard that before and it's an interesting concept. Okay, so especially when I was in high school, so I went to, a very kind of academic high school. Let's just leave it at that. And yet we didn't have career counseling, right? So all I knew in high school in the early 90s was you either become a doctor or a lawyer, you could become a teacher, you could become a nurse. The expanse of careers was just not something I knew of. So of course in Jamaica, I did common entrance, which was before PET, before GSAT. So I did it early. I did it when I was 10. So by the time I got to fourth form, I was 14, and which I think is quite unfair in terms of developmentally, to have a 14-year-old try to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives.
Amen.
And so it doesn't work developmentally for us. For those of you who will ever go into career counseling and do more vocational psychology, you will see that there are theories that advise against that. So of course, because I went to a very academic high school, if you're bright, right, you're going to medicine. That's because you're bright. So I did a lot of the sciences. I did biochemistry, physics. I also did the business subjects, probably because my father was a business person. So you could also become a business person. Absolutely hated chemistry with a passion that knew no bounds. I used to say when I was 15, I do not have a mind that can process learning facts like that. It's very boring to me. I don't get it. I have a mind that processes patterns. So I was one of the students who I could read a paragraph from a psychology book and I would relate it to history. I would relate it to what's going on in economics. That's how my mind works. So when I was in fifth form and had to do chemistry, I was reduced to tears when I discovered medicine is basically, you have to do chemistry full, and realized there's no way. So I had people who said to me, so I got a 3 in chemistry, which at that time was considered a fail. I did not want to do it over. I did not know what I wanted to do. People said, are you sure? Don't give up, Debbie. You're so bright. And I was just like, I cannot give my life to this. I absolutely hate it. So I didn't know what to do. So I went to what we called A-levels at that time, and I did economics, history, and math. I also hated math. I don't know why I did math at A-levels. I think I did math because although I liked literature, hello, I'm a poetry therapist now. I thought if you did literature, economics, and history, you would have to do law when you got to university, and I wasn't too sure about law. So I got to university and I entered the Faculty of Social Sciences, majoring in business management, major economics minor. That was my degree to be. And introduction to psychology was a requirement. I knew nothing about psychology. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know it, and I absolutely loved it. So at that point, we had lecturers like Mr. Brown and Mr. Branch and Dr. Mattis, and I just really loved being in their classes. So in my second year, I switched to management major psychology minor. So, I had to do summer school and go to my parents and say, yes, I really want to do this. Can you pay for these 2 classes? And in my third year, I switched to management major, psychology major. So I graduated with a double major in psychology and management, and thought there's no way in hell I was going to go to school to do any PhD, because I'm not going to stay in school that long. So I would opt to do human resource management, which in my mind was a nice mix between psychology and management, which I'm not sure it is, to say the truth, but at 20, that's what I thought. Absolutely hated my first job. I was a job as a junior librarian. It was absolutely horrendous. I would cry in the bathroom when I went to work. The only part that I loved was when people would come up to me and ask me for help, and I would do research. And then I thought, you know what? Let me try the master's. I loved social psychology, but didn't think I wanted a career in just research and teaching. So pursued a master's in counseling, because it was at that point that I realized if you do something in your life that you hate, you'll be miserable. And then I just never stopped from there. Another crossroads, I'm telling you this, if people think it has to be straight line. After I finished the master's, I was a case manager of the homeless mentally ill in New York City. I liked doing that. Didn't know if I was supposed to pursue clinical psychology or counseling psychology or community psychology or social and personality psychology. And went around asking people what I must do. If I wanted to go back to Jamaica, should I do clinical psychology? And basically the advice that I got was it really doesn't matter. Choose a program that you like. And so I chose counseling psychology because the program that I went to was heavily focused on justice, anti-racism, multicultural studies. And so in the States, counseling psychology is very heavily into that at that point when I did it. However, my experiences were very similar to a clinical psychology PhD in that I did a year-long course in psychological testing. I did internships in a forensic setting. I did internships in psychiatric hospitals. So I can't say there was any internship that a clinical psychology doc student did that I didn't do. Actually, I did not want to go into college counseling. I thought that I would end up in a community, but we see life just throws things at you that surprise you, and you end up in places you didn't think you would be, and you're just quite fine. It works out. So that's my story. But you had a question that you wanted me to focus on specifically.
Yes, that was what would have been your greatest help studying. So what did you crutch on
Okay.
when you had maybe a hard concept, or
Oh,
if you were going through a rough patch, but you still needed to get stuff done, obviously. What did you use to help you along the way?
so I think my roughest patches in my doc studies, studying for my comprehensive exams, which is this long exam where you study everything, and statistics, because I said math is not my thing. What helps me was studying with others. So I would literally, on the weekends, my friends and I would be in the library and we would study together and joke together. And somehow in that community, it made it very easy. I also had to learn to ask for help. So if any of you are shy and you don't ask for help, asking a lecturer, a teaching assistant for help really made a lot of difference for me. And I learned to search for alternative books. So if a lecturer was using a book that it didn't make sense to me, but I found online, on YouTube, the same topic, but in a book that made sense to me, I could learn it from that book. And then I would go back to the lecture notes and it would make sense. So it's okay if the lecture notes or whatever just not clicking for you, find an alternative source, like it's fine. And then you might go back to the lecture notes, better understanding what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chambers. Dr. Johnson, are you still here?
Yes, I am. Are
Oh,
you hearing
great.
me? Oh, I came back. I came back on.
I wanted you to complete the point that you were making before you left.
Oh, okay. Oh, so I was just saying that the part of the mind that makes us do stuff, or the unconscious part of the mind does not process the negative. And so if you want to achieve something, it's important to say it the way you want it as opposed to how you don't want it. So I think culturally, or this is just kind of how we have all been socialized. We have been socialized to speak about what we don't want. So I don't want to fail. I don't want to be fat. I used to say to myself, I don't want to fall. And this was at UWI. And after falling about 5 times right where the Peach building is, I learned that, oh my gosh, I need to stop saying this, because the minute I thought it was the minute I was almost flat on my face. And so the mind takes instructions from us through our thoughts. And if it doesn't process the negative and you're telling it what you don't want, you're actually instructing it to give you what you don't want. That was the point I was trying to make.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'd like to wrap up. We have a minute before the next session, so I'd invite only one question from anyone in the listening audience. But we also want to take this moment to thank Dr. Chambers and Dr. Johnson for taking time out of their day, and now this shifting schedule with everybody trying to go back to normal. Everything is hectic, and you didn't have to do this, but you did. So I want to thank you quite heartily on behalf of the entire club, for coming out and helping us sort through
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Okay, so are there any questions? Going once, going twice.
My question is on mentor.
Okay, so they're asking about mentorship from either. I'm not understanding this statement. Are you wondering if they're up for?
Oh,
okay,
do they provide mentor? Okay.
Are you so let me see if I can understand it. Are you wondering if you approach me whether I would provide mentorship? Or I know that the undergrad program, the coordinator for the undergrad program has set in place some structure or policy to address mentoring for undergrads. I think that has started. I'm not sure. That was in the works. I'm not sure if it is being executed. I can say to you that when I'm approached, I respond to students. Currently, I don't have an undergrad that I'm mentoring at the level of graduate, the master's program, though. We have mentees.
Okay, Kajamba, I'm told your hand is up. Would you like to come on now?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I had a question for two questions actually for each doctor, but I don't know if you have time for that. So I'll just go with one question and pose it to both Dr. Johnson and Dr. Chambers. And it was essentially about the limits of talk therapy. I know when people hear about therapy in general, they think it's just that you come and you sit down and you talk about your problems. And I know that it has to be more intricate than that. But often for people, talking and processing and reprogramming sometimes when essentially the main medium is just kind of talking through different things. For a lot of people, they don't think that will be enough. And sometimes I imagine when they come to therapy, it doesn't feel like it's enough because they have traumas that affect them on a deeper level. So my question is, how often do you find with your patients or your clients that talk therapy or the methods that you are using don't seem to be getting through to them? And what do you do when it gets to that point? What direction do you go in? What do you shift to?
Okay, let me start. So usually, one of the things to think about is that people who voluntarily seek therapy, they're already motivated to change. So it's not that they're coming and saying, I can't get help. What I have been doing, maybe for the past 4 or 5 years, is that I take a strength-based approach to psychotherapy. And what do I mean by that? I believe that people have the answers inside of themselves to sort out whatever it is that they need to sort out. Mm-hmm. And my job is simply a facilitator. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I find is that when people are empowered to understand that all they need, they already have, there is not this seeming resistance that you're alluding to. So now there are different strategies, though, that are required based on what the client brings. What I find, so I have techniques that help me in a very short time with trauma. and there's mental emotional release that I do for trauma, because I find that it works really, really, really fast. If there are other things that people want, then you have different kind of tools and strategies. But I find that empowering people to connect with what they already know is a way to kind of help them to stand on their feet. My philosophy is I need to help you as fast as you can, so you don't need to come to me anymore. So that has always been my position, that my job is to help people to not need me, and so it's about helping them to connect with resources that they already have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think very similarly to what Dr. Johnson is saying, I rarely, again, unless people didn't come back, I rarely have people who are unwilling to start somewhere with talking, right? And so again, it's not my job to prod things out of them, but to kind of patiently journey with them, right? Using techniques to help them process some of the heavier traumatic, maybe material. There are more and more, we're understanding more about somatic techniques. There are techniques that Dr. Johnson has mentioned. There are a few people who are training things like EMDR. And so although EMDR includes interviews and so on, it's about eye movement and how that processes things, and that seems to help quickly. So there are people who have different tools in their toolboxes. I've had people come to me, even at UE, and not talk, but they come back. So I guess I'm providing a holding space, right? And I have had one or two people where I've just pulled out a poem and said, does this poem capture your experience? And then we spend a few sessions just writing poetry, which to some people may be like, what you're doing, you're just writing poetry, but they're processing on a different level some of their traumatic experiences until they feel safe enough to go to another level. So it really just depends. There is art therapy, there's dance therapy and movement therapy, there's drumming therapy, all of that. That's not my area of expertise. I have a fondness for the creative therapies, but I'm not trained in like dance or art or drumming. But that they do have spaces in Jamaica that do art therapy and drum circles. So there's also other things which I won't get into at this point. There's a lot of talk in psychology about mushrooms and all of that stuff. That's not my area of expertise. There are debates about it, but as psychology students, I think it's interesting for you to know what is out there, right? To make an informed, educated, ethical decision.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Anybody up for grabs? Is anyone's hand up? I realize that I can't see the notification for hands. Anyone? Okay. So I will cut Naomi. Okay, what's your question? Would you like to turn on your mic rather than type? Because that should be faster. No?
Oh.
Okay. Can you be financially stable?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Naomi. I am a senior lecturer at UWI, and so have a particular salary. But what I can tell you is that my practice 2 days a week does better than my UWI salary. Here is the thing that kind of pains my heart in a sense. the people who need it most are not able to afford it. And so that to me is the tragedy of this. But then it, you know, as psychologists, part of the reason that we went to school is not just because we want to help, but we want to have a particular lifestyle, you know, and so it requires charging for services. But what I can say is that the thing to do as you're being trained is to make sure that you learn everything that you can. You're extremely good at what you do. And so you're not guilty when you state your rate, you know, because you understand what it is that you're providing your client. But you can absolutely live extremely, I can speak for clinical. I'm not sure necessarily what it's like, how Debbie does what she does. So just to give you a kind of sense in terms of, and let me use the US rates. So a therapy session is 150 US per session. A psychological evaluation is 1,500 to 2,000 US. A neuropsychological is more, about 3,000. Consultation, so we also consult. Consultation could be maybe 500 US an hour. So this kind of gives you a sense of what is possible in the Caribbean. So you're asking me, what is my rate? Okay. So for me, my rate is 100 US. My Jamaican rate is 100 US, or the Jamaican equivalent. My corporate rate is like 50,000 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so I need Dr. Rose to mentor me. No, but very quickly, yes, you can make a living. I think, okay. And I think the nice thing of having me and Dr. Rose on is that you will see somebody who's been in the field for a long time, and somebody who is, I'm no longer considered early counseling psychologist because I'm 10 years now, but I'm still early in the field. Yes, you can. This is my lesson. Just as Dr. Rose said, you have to learn to set boundaries, and you have to learn to process any guilt that you feel. I used to feel so bad early on. Like, oh my God, can they afford it? And then I realized, yes, people will pay if they believe that you offer something of value. And I've had to grow to learn that it's important for some people to pay, because it's like, yes. No, yes. Don't go binge shopping. You have your therapy session to pay for. So then they begin to learn how to prioritize themselves and their care. Now, if you are a psychologist, I said, yes, but there are, you know, I enjoy, so I started like working in the inner city. I enjoy that. You can arrange your practice such that you either have sliding scale spots, or if you do more consultations, like say, or sometimes I do lectures for US universities and they pay me in US dollars, then I will say, okay, I know that if I organize myself properly, I can have one Saturday a month where I can go down to, I have friends in the church who work in West Kingston, etc., and provide workshops at no cost, because I am making a living very well here. So that's where I am beginning to be in my career, where I'm learning you cannot just give yourself away to everybody. You're gonna burn out. And then when you come home and you can't buy the Chinese food at the end of the day, because you're like, what am I in this for? Right. It's okay to make money. It's not a sin. You just have to learn how to balance boundaries, set your priorities, and organize yourself. And that's also where advocacy comes in. I think the future is we need to advocate for more insurance payment in Jamaica, and advocate for people to have a fairer wage or standard of living so that people can afford to do these things. That's where being advocates as psychologists also comes in, if you choose to do that kind of stuff.
Okay, and on that note, I want to thank both psychologists once again for spending time to speak with us and for the transparency as well. Very rarely do I hear this question being asked and even answered as candidly as it has been. So we do appreciate it. And now I'd like to segue into our session 2. So in session 2, we have Dr. Marina Ramkisoon, we have Dr. Tracy McFarlane, and Mr. Orlando Brown, right? So we are zeroing in on health, social, and educational psychology. And as I said, Dr. Ramkisoon is with us. She has over 20 years rather in academia in social psychology under her belt, and is the current director of the Human Resource Management Division in the Office of the Campus Registrar for UWI Mona. We also have Dr. Tracy McFarlane, social and health psychologist, having done consultancies with local and regional organizations, and is a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona, with close to 2 decades of experience. Also with us is Mr. Orlando Brown, a holder of a BSc in Psychology and Education and a Master's in Educational Psychology, with honors and distinction, respectively. He has experience tutoring at UWI for 4 years and has been a guidance counselor at the primary level for 5. He uses his free time to travel and to work with the younger generation in a bid to empower them. So we have a running theme, at least between all three, amongst all three, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Chambers, and Mr. Brown, theme of empowerment. And speaking of Mr. Brown, we will start with him. Mr. Brown, are you here?
I am here, and as you see, I'm heading home, so I hope everybody can bear with my communication skills. I'll try to be as effective. Good afternoon to everyone. I was listening earlier, and then it struck me that 3 of the persons who are here actually lectured me in undergrad. So shout out to all of them. So that was a good thing, you know. So I'm like, oh Lord, I'm the youngest of them all, and I'm like, wow, looking back, it still seems like a long time, but it's good to be here. So when I got the email, I was like, all right, I have to come and talk about educational psychology, and I have to talk about my journey. How did I reach over into educational psychology from psychology in the first place?
That is actually my first question for you.
Exactly. So and ironically, one of the persons who helped me a little bit and guide me through the process was actually Dr. Tracy McFarlane, who actually I went to and I said, you know, I feel like I want to branch out right now because I've seen my my degree in psychology. I was like, I want to do a minor, but I didn't know what I wanted to do my minor in actually. And I went over and I saw these courses, motivation as a teacher. And I said to myself, this seems interesting. So I'm going to try. And when I went over there, I fell in love with education. And I went back to Dr. McFarlane. Dr. McFarlane, you know, say, I feel as though I want to do a minor in education. I said, of course, Orlando, you can. And then she said, I know of a student who I taught, her name is Dr. Cole. And she was a psychology major, and then she went and she did her master's in educational psychology. But Orlando, I think you should still consider applied psychology, you know, in your master's. You know, keep that out to the mind. I'm like, of course. And, you know, I eventually found myself over in education, over in minor in education, and I did my major in psychology, minor in education, where I specialized in history education. After my degree, unlike many, I decided to take a break. So after my degree, I took a vacation, a little trip, and say recharge and come back to life. So my first job was actually working as a customer service representative at Scotiabank, and it was really just to pass time, to be honest. And I learned a lot, I can say, because let's be honest, you know, still move. We move. Was getting to 6 months. I'm like, I'm not really happy in this, and this is getting really stressful. The whole demand of it, and I said to myself, all right, I attended my resignation lesson, and I booked my ticket and I flew out. I took another 3 months to get my mental health together, and while I was away, I got a call from my old class colleague from UE who I did education, and said, Orlando, are you doing anything now? I said, no, I'm on a break. I'm resting myself and, recuperating. She said, would you want to teach? I'm like, teaching? What am I going to do with teaching right now? So I said, all right, I'm not doing anything. I like getting myself in, experiencing life itself. So I said, all right, but I'm away. So how is that going to work out? So you'd have to do the interview over the phone and see what's going on. I said, all right. So I called the person and said, yes, this I heard about you need someone to teach. And at this time, the person said, okay, all right. So we did it, and she liked my approach and my style and everything and my content base. So she said, could you come back early? And I said, no, I can't really. I kind of not going to stay extra money to come back and then not get a job, really. So I said, I have 1 more week, then I'll come back. So I came back the following week that I was supposed to come back, and I went in to that high school, which was Arden High. And I met with the person. Did the second interview, and they said, go teach a class. That's where I started in my teaching world, where I taught history and Caribbean studies at the upper level. And then I was like, all right, life seems okay. But then things were happening again. And then this is what happened next. I got a call from the person to say, hey, you did a degree in psychology, right? And so you want to be a guidance counselor? And I said, wow, counseling. Yeah, I did some counseling things in my degree. So why not? Why not jump into something else? And with that, I was like, all right, I went and did the interview, and I got the call back 2 weeks later. I said, hey, we're offering a job. And that's when I went to the next school, which was Campion College, where I was a guidance counselor for 1 year at another secondary level. And it taught me so much. And during that time, I was like, all right, Orlando, you've been working now. You can start getting yourself back into that mindset to actually go back to school and go do your master's, because you're getting old. And I said, all right, let's go do this. So I applied, and eventually I got first got through with educational psychology. I was like, let me just go do this. So you know who wasn't too pleased about that, because when I woke up and I went and I go look for Dr. Tracy McCorry, that he was like, Orlando, what are you doing? I saw you applying to the finish thing. What is going on? And I said, I accepted. I was overseas and I saw this company and I jumped on it, and I was like, all right. So I started my master's in 2019, and I really went on a next journey in life as it relates to understanding the dynamics of educational psychology, because you have to have a passion for education and understanding not just the learner, but also the environment that facilitates the learner, the metacognition of it, and also understanding the cognitive process that enables a child or a student, or even the adult learner to even receive that learning to take place. So for me, I was really excited for this journey, and I was already in the education system, so I said, why not continue? And also that continued in my journey where, I started tutoring at UE while doing my master's and everything. And for me, the most part, one of the things that question is asked is that, what can you do with your degree? And the first thing I always tell the UE students is this: make yourself marketable. Don't put yourself in a box. A lot of times we put ourselves in a box where we tell ourselves, and we hear it a lot, that there's nothing you can do with your degree. Your degree makes you trainable. But the next step is making yourself also accessible and also putting yourself out there to say, I can learn and I can do this. Also allow yourself to branch out. Don't just stay in a box to say that this is what I want to do. Because the thing is this, sometimes we do the degree and then we say, yeah, we like the counseling aspect. But then when we recognize that, okay, maybe when I do a session with somebody, it's not things that I want to counsel because it's a lot and I can't really take on the emotional dumping because it's too much. And then you have to say to yourself, now, what can I do? And there are persons who can go in an organization and they just fit in the HR part of it because of their psychology background. Or they go in the classroom you just go in the counseling, you're going to feel there's different aspects of
Wait,
psychology.
Mr. Brown,
And
I want to interject for a
yeah,
moment. I want to interject. So
yeah,
I want to segue to actually Dr. McFarlane for a bit. You had
yeah,
spoken
sure.
about being one of your motivators, a mentor.
Yes, yes. Of course, listen, we go way back. You know, when I see her, I'm like, how you doing?
So, for Dr. McFarlane, I wanted to actually ask you, how important is it? Sorry, yes, rather, how would you describe your impact in your field? Because, I mean, in motivate you, this is another sector for psychology for him, but it really brought to me, what do psychologists ultimately work towards in their own little microcosm, if you want to say that. So what do you feel your impact is in your field?
Okay. Thanks for having me. And Orlando, bless yourself. My colleague and other colleagues, it's good to see you all, and my current and past students. It's always a pleasure. It's a good question that you asked, Marisha, and it's actually something that I've been in the, well, all right. So as a woman of advanced age, I've been in the field for a while. And I think to stop and ask what one's impact is an important question. So I appreciate you asking me that. And I think that the first, and given the current context of today's conversation, my arguably greatest sphere of influence would be in teaching my students. And one of the orientations that I take in teaching my students and in supervising their research and having the, what I like to call a chit chat about career choices. Obviously, they don't all listen to me, current case in point, but one of the things that's important to me is to emphasize the importance of my students stepping out and just going for it. I'm not one of those people who point out first the limitations. I'm always talking about the opportunities and the needs that are there. And I encourage my students and my junior colleague to approach their journey in that way. So that's the most immediate and obvious sphere of influence, just given today's conversation. But of course, in terms of my own aspirations, the other areas in which I flex my professional muscles would be in doing research and disseminating that research. And anybody who knows me, they know that I'm a conference enthusiast. So I embrace the opportunity to go to conferences, to present my own work, and also to interact with other scholars internationally, so that we can have that dialogue about what's happening in the field, what's the cutting edge, where the discipline is moving. Health psychology, given what you've invited me to talk about, I'll emphasize that. But health psychology is a growing field and widely applicable. So there's so many ways in which social health psychology can be put to use in the service of community. So the opportunity to do research and to talk about that and to actually write about it, publish, that's one area of interest and influence. But also I do consultancies, and we don't have all day. And unfortunately, I do have a 4:00 event, so I'm tightly scheduled. But I'll just say that in terms of consultancies, during this pandemic, I've had the opportunity to speak to people about the stress and the challenges that are COVID related, hearing about the pandemic, how persons respond to it in a group setting, because that's the focus of my work. I don't work with individuals, but in a group. So the first thing that I was asked to do at the onset of this pandemic was to have a session with the marketing group of one of our financial organizations. And they were saying that before COVID hit, we used to meet face-to-face every week. And things have changed. The way we interact has changed so much, given how we've had to adjust with the physical distancing, work from home, etc. Could you come and just help us to make sense of what we're dealing with and to give us some tools? So I embraced that opportunity. I went right away. And that was the start of a series of that type of presentation and intervention that I've been doing. So you start with just kind of acknowledging stress and what stress is and how stress presents and how persons respond to stress, then talking about the importance of self-care and so on. So giving, depending on the group and depending on, because I have to change things up to keep myself interested. And there are a lot of ways in which you can talk about stuff, but if you're invited for a half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour session, there's only so much you can cover. But usually I like to focus on what can help persons individually and groups to be resilient, because that's the important thing. That's the reality of life. Haven't we learned that with the pandemic, that life is dynamic? We're going to get hits, but the important thing is recovering from the hits. And of course, given my orientation to my research and my work, I'm always looking for the value added component. So not just recovering to baseline, which is essentially what resilience is, but the potential for thriving. So that's what I talk about professionally and personally every opportunity I get. And so in terms of focus, the focus area of my influence, I would have to say it's around positive responses, right? Psychologists make a living in pointing out and responding to human vulnerability. But that's not the only way in which humans respond to life. And so my path, ever since I was in graduate school, has been to look at opportunities for resistance in the human experience.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to jump to Dr. Ramke soon now, because I would like to ask her, if you were to encourage anyone who has had an interest in social psychology, what would be the main things you tell them about your job?
About my job?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. All you amazing people. Glad to be back with you. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Rose. Hi. All right. So, social psychology in my job. My job currently as temporary director of HR at Mona. Very practically speaking, you always have to pay attention to the fact that people are looking at you. People are looking at how you present yourself. People are looking at what you say. The world is small, and how you present yourself and what you say carries across. As soon as you say it, it's taken as a representation of who you are and what you stand for. So you always have to remember that you're on a stage and people are looking at you and paying attention to whatever message you're putting forward. So you have to pay attention to your self-presentation. However, also try to be as authentic as possible in what you are putting forward. The place is very small. People are listening to you, they're judging you. Social psychology. In addition, one of the things that you have to think about when you're looking at people, because HR is about people and culture. It's about managing people and it's about developing people. But when you're thinking about people, they're quite interested in equity. They're also interested in the fact that there are perceptions of being treated unfairly. So the world is not level based on some people's past experiences. And so they're paying attention to how they're treated. They're paying attention to how they see HR treat others. So is HR showing favoritism? Is the boss showing favoritism? Is the boss discriminating against another person? On campus, when you think about the different categories of staff that we have, you have a typical intergroup relations scenario where you have 3 different unionized groups, and all of that intergroup relations and conflict comes into play. If one group sees themselves as less than the other, or one group might see itself as better than the other, and HR has to be paying attention to that, the intergroup dynamics. Another main thing, when you're thinking about developing staff, you're thinking about helping departments, you're thinking about helping managers to get greater productivity. You think about group dynamics. You think about how to improve teams. You think about how people work best together. What is the best composition? What's the best size? What kind of communication you need to facilitate within the group to get the, group identity going so that you can get productivity. So many areas of social psychology overlap with what you do as an HR practitioner. So it starts with self, can move on to groups, look at intergroup relations. The self part is pretty interesting. And through Dr. Mack's work as well, you would see there's an integration between social psychology as self and personality. But personality plays a big part in understanding yourself as an employee and understanding your colleagues and understanding your manager, because you can't escape it. You can't escape the fact that somebody has some consistent patterns of thinking and behaving, and that's just who they are. And you have to try to understand and demonstrate your emotional intelligence when working with others. That's one of the things that, whether it is social psychology, pure psychology, building your emotional intelligence is absolutely critical for working with others and in the HR field.
I'm glad that you said that, because I want to know how all of that maneuvering actually affects you as a person, because you're not just Dr. Ramkasoon, the HR director, or the social psychologist. Some of that would probably bleed into your everyday. So how does that affect you?
All right, so the first thing I'd have to do is go to Dr. Mack for some stress relief techniques, right? You have to go to Dr. Debbie to try and let off some steam, because again, it's about people and culture. And the hardest part, but the most rewarding part, is dealing with people. So HR management, you have processes, you have rules. It's easy to administer because the rules are there. But when it comes to treating with people, relating to people, understanding people, getting past conflicts with people, that part is very challenging. And HR is called in to help, but HR would also have its own challenges to deal with. And as you say, as a person, you have to understand all of it in context. So me, I'm experiencing things, but I'm also the person that people are looking to for guidance as to how to deal with these things. So how does it affect me personally? As I said, coming into this job, the most important skill I need to have is emotional intelligence. Have to be aware of what I'm feeling, what I'm putting out there, what people are feeling, what people are putting out there, what you are receiving from people, because quite often, if there is a challenge with people not working together, it's because they're not getting along. I've noticed that it's not really about competence. If you're not doing well at your job, it's not so much the technical competence. People have that. They know what their jobs are about. They know what to do. But when they're not actually making progress, especially when they have to work with others, I have found in my experience since May here that it's really an interpersonal challenge. People are not understanding each other as much as they may need to. They're not giving others the benefit of the doubt. There are assumptions, there are prejudices, there are histories, and it's difficult to get over. So being aware of that fact and assessing yourself to understand, well, what are you taking into this situation that you might need to revisit? Are you holding any grudges? Are you upset today for another reason and taking it out on somebody else? Are you frustrated? Are you not answering the phone because you have so many things to do and you're ignoring the client? What's going on with you is important. And so those are the things that you assess every day to try to bring your best self, because you are client serving and you really have a duty to serve the client, and assessing yourself helps for you to bring the best self to everybody else.
Agreed. Dr. McFarlane, the same question. What impact has working in your field personally what does it personally have on you?
Okay, so my work currently consists of research and teaching, right? So research, teaching, consultancy. So those three prongs. And I was just listening to what Dr. Ramkisoon said, and I think that we would all be served, all of us, every day, to have a little practice of insight, and introspection before we interact with others. So, thanks for that, Dr. Ramkisoon. That's something I think that from the chat, people are impacted by that, and I'm reflecting on that also. Okay, so the impact that so my research is very fulfilling. I like to work in teams, and ever since I've received my training, or even in graduate school, I think maybe I got this from graduate school in my program, which I did my PhD at the City University of New York Graduate Center, and we were very oriented to work in teams. So there were a lot of people with different interests around social psychology and personality psychology. A lot of it tended to be applied, and our work was very social. We worked with each other. You're interested in this, you're interested in that, let's do something together. And also our faculty encouraged that. So I bring that a lot into my professional work. It hasn't always worked out, but I'm always eager to be doing my research and publishing with colleagues. So that is very fulfilling for me in terms of how it has affected me. When I get a chance to share interest with somebody, let's work on that. Let's apply for this grant. Dr. Ramkisoon and I have collaborated, and we published together. And through those experiences, when you collaborate with people and you work together, these are high stakes situations. It's important for the work that we're doing to result in significant outcomes. So these are high stakes situations. And when it works, it's very fulfilling. And even when we have snags, it's an opportunity for growth and development. Then now a big part of most of my day is spent around my teaching and my interaction with students. I mean, it's social and I enjoy it. I love teaching. I just don't like to grade papers. So that's the least favorite part of my job. And I wish somebody would do that for me. If I would just show up and share my knowledge with students all the time and even supervise their research, I would have the best job in the world. But when you stick in the grading, then I'm not so happy. But and then of course the consultancies, that's a way in which I stretch myself, because every engagement is different, so you go to a different company, a different group of persons, and the requests might be similar. Okay, could you come and help us to talk about communication, because we've had some breakdown in our teams. And then I usually do a little work beforehand to find out what type of group I'm going into, what their history is, get a whiff of some of the dynamics, so that when I'm talking to them and making recommendations, I'm not clueless or off course, right? So you don't just go in with a textbook. So each of those engagements are challenging to me, and I really like it. I never aspired to be a one-on-one counselor, but those of us who do interventions with groups, the group is a unit. So if you think about it in terms of your research, it's an N of one, and within the one, it consists of many people with different backgrounds and so on. So I feel like my consultancies allow me the opportunity to apply my basic training in a meaningful way. So I hope I'm answering.
Yes, you did.
What? Yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm not disengaged at all from my work, and it keeps fresh and interesting because I allow myself to take a different approach each time.
Okay, thank you for that. In keeping with impact on the self, I want to go to Mr. Brown now briefly. What has working with children taught you? And I ask this really because when parents I get this notion that parents feel like any outside help coming in regards to their children is almost like an affront to their own parenting. So I want to know what working with children has taught you on that front, where you have to maybe deal with a non-cooperative parent or one that's just more hesitant to take your advice regarding their child.
All right. So first thing it taught me is patience. And if anybody knows me, I lack patience from the longest time. But over the years, it has definitely taught me patience. And I think the first thing that hit me when I entered into that field was that persons would judge me based on that you look young. That was the first setback, was the looking young. So I found that I had to actually so how I talk and how I interact communication wise with the parents would also allow for them to understand that, okay, you're not talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about first. And in doing that, you found that they will just mellow out. So I've never had issues where it's confrontational, because my approach is very subtle, and I find that it works best where you're not trying to talk over one. Secondly, you're not trying to let the parents feel as though they're failures. Because if you try to let them feel as though they're failures, then they're going to go on defense. And the next thing is that you also have to empathize with them. Because a lot of times they just want to let you know that it's hard, and you know it's hard and everything. So you have to empathize, because they are human beings. They feel too, and they're going through a lot. And sometimes it gets put to the side because they have to put their kids first. So you have to also listen to them too. And when you're redirecting and allowing them to understand, okay, there's an issue going on, and this is what, you make the suggestion, and it can say, also tell me how you are feeling about it. So always check back in with them, because a lot of it really speaks to understanding where they're at to mentally and emotionally, so that they can connect to what's going on, and it even makes that much more of a better conversation or interaction.
Okay, so you've noted a couple bullet points like
Yeah.
empathy, patience, and I want to kind of build on that for. Okay, so my next question for you would have been, in your professional opinion, what do you think schools can improve on for children? Because it's one thing to be working with the parents, that's half of the battle, right? But in the school context, seeing as you're a part of educational psychology, it's about their learning, and the shortcomings on the side of the school have huge impacts, obviously, on the type of information children leave with and how they view school in general. What do you believe schools can improve on to aid children's learning?
All right. So, and this is very interesting, because my research was on the impact of music, teachers' use of music in the classroom with students with learning disabilities. And one of the reasons why I chose that is because sometimes a lot of our students have learning difficulties or disabilities, and it affects them in being receptive to that whole learning environment. And we sometimes get stuck in a zone where we're really one directed when it comes down to learning. And over the years, because I've also taught at the secondary, the primary, and at the tertiary, I've always had to incorporate different strategies, different ways of bringing across the information. So it can't be one level. And I think that's where sometimes we're losing them, is how we incorporate our lessons, and also linking it back to the experience, because it's about life. Learning is about life. How can we make them see that it's applicable? How can we, because for example, I was teaching my grade ones the body parts. So you have to sing, and who can sing, but I am singing, and I say my head, my shoulder, my this, my throat. And then I'll ask them, if you don't have your eyes, what does that mean? And they're responding because you've already explained the different functions of the body, and now they can put it together and say, okay, if you don't have this, that means that you can't see. So you have to make it fun. You have to incorporate things that they will say, okay, I get it. So it's not just about coming with the content, but it's about making learning fun. And over time, yes, it's not going to be always a fun topic, but try to go back and evaluate how you can also build on. We're not perfect. And I think I agree, Dr. McFarlane, when it comes on to that, hey, the marking is the hardest part of anything. I will go and teach. I would go and do a counseling session, but when it comes down to the paperwork, I'm like, Lord, here I am, I'm ready. So it is what it is, but it's a part of the process.
Okay, so recognizing that, I want to
Mm-hmm.
ask one. Well, this is a question for all three panelists now. Looking at your fields, what's the job availability like? And are you satisfied, really? So what do you see that there's a need for more persons in your niche? And how do you describe what is done for you, and like how do you think that's going to bowl over for everybody else? So Mr. Brown, seeing that you're still in the middle of my screen, very briefly, what's job availability like in educational
Okay, so
psychology?
I'm going to be very blunt. For me, I'm one of those lazy practitioners. So I usually did assessments, but I don't get to do it anymore because of I'm a full-time guidance counselor, and I also tutor. So there's not much time for it. But there's a lot of availabilities and consultancy if needs be with different organizations such as Digicel if they want to do some program implementation. Also, you can work out with any other non governmental organization as it relates to policy, and even in the government for policies. So there are jobs in ministries, there's jobs in the private sector, and also there's private things because you get trained in assessments, and also that's very critical because a lot of times we don't know what are the limitations of our students. So in assessing the intelligence of that student are also is a good way to find out how best we can assist them and developing IELP and to see how best to address those issues. So for me personally, I would say there are jobs out there. And don't limit yourself. And I'm always gonna say don't limit yourself because sometimes I see some jobs and I'm like, go for it. I would go for it, but then at the same time, I'm always cognizant of not always just jumping out. Give yourself some time to grow and have the experience so that when they look at your resume and say, okay, just move on, move on, move on. I like to stay a little while, get my foot wet so that you build on knowledge and you can say, I understand what I'm doing.
Okay, acceptable. I like that. Thank you. Dr. McFarlane, you said that you have a meeting at 4, so I'm going to jump to you. What is job availability like in health psychology?
Job availability. All right. So most of the students won't like what I'm about to say, right? But what is job availability? What's that? So my personal orientation is that as Caribbean people, we have to just kind of move beyond that idea of somebody needs to hire me and I need to find that person who needs to hire me. We're too smart. We're too ready. We have too much to offer for that. So remember, in the Caribbean, so first, when you asked the question, my immediate thing was where. And one of the things that we have learned from COVID is that the world is our oyster. We can really be anywhere. That's not new to Caribbean people because, it's very hard to go to anywhere in the world and not find Caribbean people. So are there jobs in my field? Of course they are. Where are they? They're all over the world. Are there a lot of them in the Caribbean? Not yet. But why is that? So it's because what I tell my students, my graduate students, is that if you take the newspaper up or, that's of course in the old days, but wherever it is that the jobs are, if you look for the jobs, it's not likely that you're going to see, we are looking for an applied psychologist, or we're looking for a health psychologist, or, just to poach on the other areas and IO psychology, etc. Because society doesn't know that's what they need. But when you look at what they need in their company, then you see that you have the training to do that. And so you apply for it, right? So that last part that I said is what I tell my students, that's the orientation that we have to have. We have to stop at this point expecting people to come looking for us. We have to learn from the culture that is elsewhere. And that is one of confidence, one of self-marketing, and one of assertiveness. Like those things aren't really valued in our culture, but what has it gotten us, right? So we need to learn how to be bilingual in that regard. We have to dial it back in terms of our personal relationships, right? Because then it causes conflict. But in terms of our corporate and professional relationships, we definitely need to be more assertive, more aware of what we have to offer and to acquire the language to offer. Just a couple of days ago, I was talking to my niece, and she has a master's degree in a very specific area, but she's interested in real estate, she's interested in business, she's interested in marketing. And she said to me, I've been looking at Marisha. Marisha is going places. I think I want to have lunch with Marisha to talk about how I want to be involved, And so I said, all right, so what's the language? What's the language that you're going to use? And we spent some time tossing it back and forth to say, what are the terms out there that can describe what she wants to do for Marisha, so that when she has the lunch, she can talk in a way that Marisha is hearing. And I want to tell you that so I've been thinking about it. I'm like, is it? And so on. We've been going back and forth. And yesterday she told me that the lunch is arranged for Friday, and she's pretty much decided on what her high points are that she wants to highlight. And this is not at all in our area of training. So, but for me now, when I was a graduate student, and I wrote to Najani a little bit of my academic bio so that it's available for anybody who wants it. When I was a graduate student, I volunteered a lot. And I also worked for some money, but not big bucks. But I just got into everything because I was in New York City, and my mind was, when I go back to Jamaica, I don't know if these opportunities will be there, but I want to get these skills and these exposures. And so I have quite a few lines on my CV from small jobs that I acquired when I was a graduate student. But now, if somebody asks me as Dr. McFarlane, can you do this? Yeah, sure. And half of it I didn't learn in graduate school. I just acquired these competencies through volunteering and through low-level jobs while I was coming up. My first evaluation I got because somebody contacted my professor at the time and said, we have a small program. It's an after-school program for inner city kids. And would you send one of your students? Because of course she's not going to do it. Yeah, sure, send me. I'd never done an evaluation before. I got some guidance from her, and another student and I went. We evaluated the program. It's a line on my CV. And now, after that, could I evaluate programs? Sure.
So that all of this is really just going and making the space for yourself rather than waiting for something to open up.
Yes. And then, of course, I'm not saying offer yourself for things that you cannot do. And not an important part of my message is acquire the competencies while people are willing to teach you or mentor you or train you in that regard, or pay you small money to be learning valuable skills that are marketable once you get further on and have the credibility to say that you can do these things.
Absolutely.
I can't overemphasize that.
Dr. Ramkisoon, I see you nodding every step of the way. Do you agree wholeheartedly? Do
Absolutely.
You have
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, one of the things in the applied psychology program is that there is so much potential to create a job for yourself. You don't have to sit and wait. And we've been telling persons who have been in that program for a long time, and it is absolutely true. I wanted to share with you guys, I have to leave shortly, that I sat in an interview the other day, and one of the interviewees said, I see the persons who you are interviewing. And when you interviewed that gentleman there, I know him so well, I think he should get the job. So she is being interviewed for the job, But she said, I know him so well, I think he should get the job. She stands out immediately, right? As a person who is authentic and who is willing to support and encourage. And I want to encourage everybody here to be authentic and to stand out in good ways, so that even if you don't get the job you're applying for, people remember you. The other thing I wanted to say is that I started off in sociology. All of my degrees are in sociology, and look where I am. director of HR temporarily. You can train yourself up, you can learn, and you can explore, as Dr. Mack was saying, explore in so many different things and become very good and competent in areas, even if it's not where you started. The other thing is that if persons are thinking about HR is quite diverse. Don't lump it into one thing. I'm looking for persons right now in customer service. That's an excellent foundation for learning what HR is about. I'm looking right now to hire an HR analyst. I sat all day this morning doing research to provide information on a case. So your research skills are absolutely important. Your ability to communicate and make sense of information, absolutely critical. I'm looking for persons who will revamp the recruitment process. I'm looking for persons who can conduct training seminars and coordinate training. I'm looking for persons who are tech savvy, because a lot of HR is on the human resource management information system. So some HR departments across the world are actually getting smaller because a lot of it is being done digitally. And I'm looking for persons who are in employee relations, industrial relations. HR is quite diverse. And so if you're thinking about a career, you can do it with psychology. Getting certification is good. Many organizations have HR departments, so it's there, but it can be quite interesting. And helping people to develop is a part of what HR is supposed to do. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Look
you.
like I'm
Thank
going to say for that job there now, Dr. Ramsey. So I'm going to send out my resume to you. So look out for it.
No problem. No problem.
Just tell me where I'm going to send it to. I'm ready.
You know the Gmail address.
All right.
And on this end, we'd like to thank all of our panelists coming in and speaking to us, giving us different perspectives from their specific fields, their industries. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and really, gelling with us and helping us to understand really what's in store for us as we move from the basics into masters and to graduate school and all of this, and trying to impact our fields as we go along the way. And I'd like to also say to the participants, in the interest of time, because some have classes, some have other meetings to go to, etc., as you said in the chat, I'd encourage you to send your questions to the secretary, I believe, and they will compile that and send it to the panelists as soon as possible. So once again, thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. I enjoyed this session.
Thank you very much, Marisha. Thank you for having me as well. Really enjoyed it. I hope I can come back and share with you guys soon.
Yes, all the best,
How do I get to join
everyone.
the club?
All right.
How do I get to join the club?
Natsino? Is that
Yeah.
my Natsino? Natsino. I'll hook you up, Natsino.
Yeah, she's going to
I'll
hook
give
you
you
up.
a hookup. I have a personal relationship with the president. I'll hook
Yes,
you up.
I like that. I like that.
Okay, thank you.
I think I really enjoyed this session. I really enjoyed this session. So, yes.
All right, guys, all the best. Walk good, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Mr. Brown. Hi,